Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a story that basically serves as the biography of the British Empire's industrial rise.
Right, and its fall.
Yeah, and its terrifying stumble through the 20th century, plus this really strange, kind of ghostly afterlife it has in the modern world. We're talking about Ellerman Lines.
Ellerman Lines. It is a name that for a solid 100 years was totally synonymous with the ocean itself.
Literally everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Like if you were standing on a dock in Liverpool or Bombay or Cape Town,
Right.
anywhere between, say, 1892 and 1980, you would have seen their ships. They were the absolute titans of the trade route.
And yet, unless you're a maritime historian, or maybe you happen to live on a very specific street in Amsterdam, you probably haven't heard of them. I mean, this isn't like Cunard or the White Star Line.
No, they didn't have the Titanic.
Exactly. They didn't have the Titanic. They didn't have the Queen Mary. They were the workhorses.
The cargo haulers.
But the scale of this operation was just mind-boggling. We are talking about a company that started as an 800,000-pound startup.
Which was huge back then.
Massive. And they became one of the largest fleets on the planet, lost nearly everything in World War I.
Rebuilt it.
Rebuilt it, yeah. Then lost it all again in World War II.
Rebuilt it again.
Rebuilt it again, and then they just sort of vanished.
Vanished until they reappeared out of nowhere in 2021.
Which is crazy. It's a corporate resurrection that completely defies the usual logic of business history.
It really does.
So that's our mission today. We are going to trace this arc from the Victorian boardroom to the U-boat wolf packs.
Through the golden age of cargo passenger travel.
Right. All the way to the shipping container crisis of the 2020s. We need to understand how a company survives the total destruction of its assets not once, but twice.
And to really understand that resilience, you have to wrap your head around the sheer magnitude of what they built.
It's hard to visualize.
It is. We aren't talking about a few boats shuttling coal across the English Channel here. By the early 20th century, Ellerman Lines dominated the Mediterranean.
And the Near East.
The Near East, yes. They had these ships with names like City of Paris, City of London, City of Calcutta.
The city of ships, yeah.
These were the veins and arteries of the global economy before air freight even existed. And we're going to see that by looking through the historical records, the fleet lists.
The corporate histories.
All of it. It paints a picture of total dominance.
So let's go back to the source. The year is 1892. The Victorian era is peaking. The map of the world is, painted pink for the British Empire.
Very pink.
And we have this trio of financiers who decide to just jump into the shipping game. John Ellerman, Christopher Furness, and Henry O'Hagan.
It's an interesting mix of guys. You have O'Hagan and Furness, who are already established players in the market.
But the central character here is definitely John Ellerman.
Oh, without a doubt. And the funny thing is, he wasn't a sailor.
Right, not at all.
He was an accountant, a financier. He looked at ships, and he didn't see romance or the high seas. He just saw balance sheets.
Which probably explains why they didn't start small. The records show they incorporated with a capital of 800,000 pounds.
It's staggering.
Now, whenever we see Victorian money, it's really hard to contextualize for you listening today. But 800,000 pounds in 1892 it's a war chest.
It's an immense sum. To put it in perspective, a highly skilled tradesman back then might earn maybe 100 pounds a year.
Right.
So this capital allowed them to completely bypass that scrappy startup phase. There was no bootstrapping here.
They just bought their way in.
They immediately purchased the assets of Frederick Leyland & Co., which gave them a working fleet of 22 vessels right out of the gate.
It's like a hostile takeover level of entry. They bought a working airline, essentially, rather than buying a single plane.
Exactly. And the management dynamics from the start were fascinating. Initially, Christopher Furness was the chairman, and Ellerman was the managing director.
But Ellerman was clearly the shark in the tank.
Oh, absolutely. By 1893, just 1 year later, Ellerman had taken the chairmanship for himself.
And he was only 31 years old.
A 31-year-old chairman of a major shipping line. And he immediately starts playing this game of real-life monopoly.
Relentless expansion.
The expansion strategy detailed in the corporate history is just aggressive acquisition. In 1900, they bought the West Indian and Pacific Steamship Company.
Adding 20 ships to the fleet in one go.
Right. But the real test of Ellerman's acumen, and this is a story that I feel gets overlooked in business schools.
It's brilliant.
It came in 1901.
This is the J.P. Morgan connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
The American banker. J.P. Morgan was trying to buy up basically everything.
He was attempting to monopolize North Atlantic shipping. He formed this massive trust called the International Marine Mercantile Company.
Right. His goal was to totally control the rates and routes between the U.S. and Europe. So he approached Ellerman to buy the Leyland Line.
So you have the biggest banker in America coming over to buy out the British fleet. That must have caused immense anxiety in London.
Oh, huge anxiety. It was seen as a direct threat to British national security. The Americans buying the merchant fleet.
But look at what Ellerman actually does.
He agrees to sell.
He does. He sells the Leyland business to Morgan for a massive, massive profit.
But, and this is the genius part, he retains the chairmanship for a little while, and more importantly, he keeps 20 of the ships for himself.
Along with the Mediterranean routes.
Exactly. The calm, lucrative Mediterranean routes, which Morgan wasn't interested in anyway. Morgan wanted the Atlantic.
So Ellerman sells the company, takes Morgan's cash, keeps the best assets, and stays in charge.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
He took Morgan's money and used it to finance his own completely independent empire. He bought the Papiani Steamship Company almost immediately after.
Which creates the foundation for the Ellerman and Papiani line.
Right. He pivoted completely away from the highly contestable North Atlantic, where Morgan was fighting his wars, and he doubled down on the Mediterranean and the East.
It's the pivot of the century, and he just keeps consolidating power. By 1903, he buys into the George Smith & Sons City line.
And the Hall line.
Yeah.
50% of both.
Right. And this is crucial for the identity of the company. The City line is where we got those iconic names.
City of this, city of that.
City of London, City of Athens. And the Hall line gave them access to the African trade routes.
By bringing these under one umbrella, he officially changed the name to Ellerman Lines. He created a network that could move a crate of tea from Bombay to Liverpool, or a passenger from London to Cape Town, entirely within his own system.
Vertical integration.
Exactly. And he didn't stop. By 1904, he grabs the Glen Line, which was McGregor, Gow & Co., and then in 1908, he buys the Bucknell Steamship Lines, which were financially troubled.
He's just buying distressed assets, turning them around, and integrating them into the machine.
So by 1914, on the absolute eve of the First World War, Ellerman Lines isn't just a big company. It's a superpower.
They controlled 4 major subsidiaries: the Ellerman City Line, Ellerman and Bucknell, Ellerman and Papiani, and the Hall Line.
It was a dominating position, to quote the history books directly. They held total dominance in the Mediterranean and Near East.
But I want to pause on that pre-war era for a second, because there's a specific incident from 1908 that highlights the reality of operating these ships.
You're thinking of the wrecks.
Yeah, it wasn't just about balance sheets and corporate takeovers. This was incredibly dangerous work.
The city of Naples.
Exactly. The city of Naples, which wrecked on the Zenassu Reef in 1908. We tend to think of the Edwardian era as very civilized and technologically mastered, but navigation was still largely visual.
If you hit fog or a bad storm, you were in serious trouble.
Losing a capital ship like that was a massive financial blow. But for Ellerman, with his scale, it was just a line item.
He absorbed the loss and kept building. He didn't blink.
Which brings us right to 1914. The company is at its absolute zenith. John Ellerman is practically printing money.
And then the Archduke is shot in Sarajevo.
And the lights go out all over Europe.
World War I completely transformed the merchant navy overnight. We so often focus on the trenches and the Western Front, but the war at sea was the actual lifeline of Britain.
If the ships stopped moving, the island starved. Was that simple?
The British government knew this, so they immediately initiated the requisition.
Now, requisition sounds very polite and administrative, but how did this actually work in practice? Did the government just steal the ships?
It was essentially a compulsory lease. The government took total operational control of the vessel. They paid the company a set rate.
Which I'm guessing was not great.
It was often well below the market rate for freight. And the government dictated exactly what the ship did.
So Ellerman's beautiful, profitable fleet was just carved up?
Torn apart. They had to operate a skeletal service with whatever was left. The requisitioned ships became troop transports. They painted over those pristine buff funnels with drab gray paint.
Some carried munitions.
And some, the larger liners, actually became armed merchant cruisers.
Which, when you think about it, putting guns on a passenger liner seems like an incredibly desperate measure.
It was beyond desperate. They reinforced the decks as best they could, bolted on some 6-inch naval guns, and sent them out to patrol the oceans.
But they were still just merchant ships.
Exactly. They were huge targets with very thin skin, trying to act like warships against actual warships.
And the losses started basically immediately. The city of Winchester, that was the first casualty of the war, wasn't it?
The very first. August 1914.
She was a brand new ship.
Brand new. On her maiden voyage, homeward bound from India, She had a hold full of tea and spices, just doing exactly what she was built to do.
And she ran into the German cruiser Königsberg.
A commercial ship against a dedicated, heavily armed warship.
He didn't stand a chance.
None at all.
Yeah.
She was captured, the crew was taken prisoner, and the ship was scuttled, sent to the bottom.
And that must have sent an absolute shockwave through the shipping industry, the realization that the oceans were no longer safe for business.
It changed everything. But the company's response to the war, and this is the part that I find wildest about John Ellerman.
He doesn't hunker down.
No. In 1916, right in the middle of the war, while his ships are sinking left and right to U-boats, he goes shopping.
He buys the Wilson line of Hull.
And this wasn't some small regional purchase. He bought 67 vessels.
67 ships,
So-
while German submarines are actively hunting British shipping.
It was a strategic masterstroke, honestly. The Wilson Lines specialized in short sea routes, Scandinavia, the Baltic.
So Ellerman was diversifying his risk.
Exactly. If the deep ocean routes to India and Africa were cut off by U-boats or surface raiders, he still had the European trade functioning.
But the branding integration here is a detail I absolutely love.
The liveries.
Yes. Shipping lines were incredibly tribal about their colors. You knew a ship by its funnel long before you could read the name on the hull.
The Ellerman standard was very distinctive. They had buff, which is like a yellowish tan funnels, with a black top and a white dividing line.
Over a gray hull.
Right. It looked very clean, very efficient. But the Wilson line had red funnels with black tops and dark green hulls.
Which is a complete aesthetic clash.
Total clash. You'd think Ellerman would just order them all painted buff and gray immediately.
But he didn't.
He didn't. He kept the Wilson identity completely separate. He understood that in Hull, that red funnel actually meant something.
It meant local jobs, local pride.
Exactly. So the corporate entity became Ellerman's Wilson line, but the ships stayed green and red. It was very smart corporate branding for the early 20th century.
While he's buying fleets and managing paint jobs, the actual war at sea is getting weirder and much more dangerous.
We really have to talk about the theatricality of the naval war here.
You're thinking of the dummy metal ships.
Yes. The city of Oxford.
Ah, the city of Oxford. This is 1915. The British Admiralty is getting desperate to confuse the Germans. So they take this standard cargo ship.
And they basically turn her into a movie prop.
They literally used wood, canvas, and paint to build fake gun turrets and fake superstructures all over her deck.
To make her look like a dreadnought.
Right. From a distance, or through a hazy periscope sight, she was supposed to look exactly like HMS St. Vincent, which was a massive battleship. The idea being to draw enemy fire away from the real ships, or to make the Germans think the Grand Fleet was somewhere it totally wasn't.
Yes. But imagine being a merchant sailor assigned to that ship.
Oh, it's terrifying. You are sitting on a slow cargo vessel made of thin steel plating, but you're pretending to be the biggest threat on the ocean.
And your primary weapons are made of plywood. If a real German battleship engages you,
You are finished. Instantly.
it was incredibly dangerous bluffing. But it shows the desperate creativity of the era.
And then you had the inverse of that strategy, too, the Q ship.
Right, where instead of making a weak ship look strong, they made a strong ship look weak.
Like the Barralong.
The Barralong was an Ellerman ship, built in 1901, a standard, slightly rust-streaked merchant vessel. She would chug along slowly, looking like an incredibly easy target.
Because U-boats didn't always use torpedoes back then. Torpedoes were expensive.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
And they carried very few of them. So a U-boat would surface to sink a lone merchant ship with its deck gun.
And then the trap springs.
The Barralong would drop these false bulkheads and canvas screens, suddenly revealing hidden 12-pounder naval guns.
And they would blow the U-boat out of the water before the Germans could even scramble back inside and dive.
It was brutal, completely merciless, close-quarters warfare.
But unfortunately for Ellerman Lines, not every story was a clever ruse or a victorious trap. The losses overall were just catastrophic.
By the end of the war, they had lost 103 ocean vessels.
103 ships.
It's a capacity loss of up to 750,000 tons. It's a massive graveyard of metal and men.
But amidst all that destruction, there are these incredible stories of survival. The city of Exeter is one that we have to cover.
That story is legendary in the Merchant Navy.
This is the mine strike in the Indian Ocean.
Right. She's 400 miles from Bombay, middle of nowhere. She hits a naval mine.
And the explosion is massive.
The number one hold fills with water instantly. The ship starts tipping forward, heavily down by the bow. The master looks at the damage and orders abandon ship.
Which is the only rational call.
Everyone gets into the lifeboats. They pull away from the ship, just sitting out there on the water, waiting for the final plunge.
But she doesn't sink.
She doesn't sink. She just sits there, wallowing low in the water. So the master and the chief engineer, just the two of them, decide to row back to the ship.
They row back to a sinking ship.
At grave risk to their own lives. They climb up the side of this dying Leviathan. They go down deep into the dark, flooding hull to inspect the bulkheads.
That is either incredible courage or complete madness.
Probably a bit of both. But they look at the steel, they listen to the groaning of the ship, and they decide the bulkheads are going to hold.
So they called the lifeboats back.
They called everyone back. Imagine that sales pitch to the passengers in the lifeboats. All right, everyone, back on the sinking ship.
We're good, it's fine.
But they re-embarked the passengers, fired up the boilers, and they actually linked that ship 400 miles to Bombay under her own steam.
It's a massive testament to the engineering of the ships themselves. They were built remarkably tough.
They were. But luck eventually runs out for a lot of them. We see the city of Athens, mined off Cape Town in August 1917.
And then there's the naming conventions, which bring us to some interesting historical footnotes. The lesbians.
Right, we should clarify the name for modern listeners.
Yes, absolutely.
Ellerman used the city of names for the main line, but the Papiani and other subsidiaries often used Greek or Mediterranean names ending in Aegean,
Like Andalusian.
Flaminian, and lesbian, referring directly to the Greek island of Lesbos.
Right. There are two ships with this name in the company's history, and neither of them had a happy ending.
The first lesbian was built in 1915, right into the teeth of the war. She was shelled and sunk by U-35 in the Mediterranean. Just another statistic in the Great Tonnage War.
So November 1918 rolls around, the war ends. Ellerman has lost 103 ships, but John Ellerman himself is still standing.
Standing very tall. He used the insurance payouts from the lost ships and the massive war profits to start rebuilding immediately.
He didn't wait around.
No, he bought up German liners that had been seized as war reparations by the British government. He ordered new ships built.
And his personal wealth just skyrocketed.
At the time he died in 1933, he was a baronet, and his estate was valued at £37 million.
Which, again, doing the math on historical money is tough, but that made him arguably the richest man in Britain at the time.
Without a doubt, an astronomical sum. But while he passed away wealthy, the storm clouds were gathering over Europe all over again.
We move into the late 1930s. The fleet has been completely rebuilt to 105 ships.
Nearly 1 million tons of capacity.
Yeah.
One of the biggest privately owned fleets in the world. They had mixed cargo passenger ships, pure cargo, short sea traders.
And then it's 1939, World War II begins. And if World War I was a tragedy for the Merchant Navy, World War II was an absolute slaughter.
The technology of killing ships had advanced so much, the U-boats weren't just lone hunters anymore. They were operating in coordinated wolf packs.
They had better range, better torpedoes.
And air power was now a major threat. Dive bombers, torpedo bombers. Ellerman lost 60 ships out of their 105.
More than half the entire fleet.
41 sunk by submarines, 7 by air attacks, 3 by mines, 1 by a surface raider. It was relentless.
There is one specific loss that really defines this era for the company, and it's heavily featured in the sources. The city of Benares.
Yes.
Because this isn't just about losing steel and tonnage. This is about the morality of the war and how the public perceived the war at sea.
The city of Benares was a beautiful ship, a luxury liner, relatively new. In September 1940, she was requisitioned for a very specific mission. She was designated to carry evacuees to Canada.
This was part of the CORB program, right? The Children's Overseas Reception Board.
Exactly. British parents were terrified of the Bliss, the bombing of London, and the cities. So the government set up this program to send children to safety overseas.
So you have a luxury ship loaded with 90 children, plus paying passengers and the crew.
She was sailing in a convoy about 600 miles out into the Atlantic, and the weather was horrific.
Classic North Atlantic storm.
Gale force winds, freezing rain, huge swells. It was night, and U-48 spotted her.
Did the U-boat commander know who was on board?
No. There's no way he could have known. To the U-boat, it was just a large British merchant ship in a convoy, a valid military target. They fired a torpedo.
And it hit.
The result was an absolute nightmare. The torpedo struck perfectly. The ship lost power and started sinking fast. She went down in 30 minutes.
And because of the storm?
Because of the storm and the severe list of the sinking ship, launching the lifeboats was nearly impossible. Many of the boats capsized as soon as they hit the water.
The numbers are just heartbreaking to read.
258 people died in the freezing water.
Yeah.
And 81 of them were children.
81 kids.
It was officially cited as the worst maritime disaster in Ellerman Lines history.
And the historical impact of that event was massive. When the news broke back in Britain, it effectively ended the overseas evacuation program immediately.
The public realized that the Atlantic Ocean was just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the Blitz.
It changes the narrative of the war at sea, from naval battles to literal atrocities in the public eye.
It does. It crystallized the cruelty of the U-boat war. And yet, the sailors had to just keep going back out there.
Which is astounding. You look at the fleet list and it's just loss after loss. The city of Pretoria in 1943.
Torpedoed. All 149 people on board died.
The city of Shanghai in 1941, torpedoed by U-103. The second city of Winchester, also torpedoed by U-103.
The city of Cairo in 1942, sunk by U-68. The carnage was just relentless.
There is a contrasting story, though, from the sources. The city of Birmingham.
Ah, right. This was a mine strike.
Yes, in 1940.
She hit a mine and sank. But because the evacuation was orderly and the weather conditions were better, every single person, all 80 souls on board, was saved.
It really highlights the capriciousness of fate at sea during the war. One night, you lose everyone. The next day, in a similar situation, everyone survives.
Completely down to luck and weather.
There's another tragic vignette from this era involving that unlucky name we mentioned earlier, the second lesbian.
Built in 1923. She actually survived the interwar years fine, but during World War II, she was operating in the Mediterranean.
And she didn't get sunk by a U-boat.
No, she was seized by Vichy French forces.
The collaborationist French government.
Exactly, captured by former allies. And rather than let her be recaptured by the advancing British forces later on, the Vichy French just scuttled her in Beirut harbor.
A sad, kind of ignoble end for a ship.
Very much so.
So by 1945, the war is finally over. The fleet is decimated yet again, down to 45 ships from 105.
But the company has done this before. They know how to rebuild.
They start the rebuild immediately. But this time, the corporate strategy shifts significantly. They launch what the records call the new policy.
This is a really fascinating moment in maritime history. We're in the late 40s.
Right.
Aviation commercial flight is starting to happen, but it's not totally dominant yet. The Jet H hasn't quite arrived. So Ellerman decides to build what they called fast steam cargo liners.
And the key defining feature of these new ships is the passenger limit.
12 passengers.
12. Exactly. Why 12? I mean, why not 20? Why not 50?
It's the magic number in international maritime law.
Ah, a loophole.
A huge loophole. If you carry 13 passengers, you are legally classified as a passenger ship.
Which means
you need a dedicated ship's doctor, a hospital on board, very specific watertight bulkhead spacing, massive amounts of extra lifeboats, more stewards, more cooks.
it's incredibly expensive to run a passenger
Oh,
ship.
very expensive. But if you carry exactly 12 passengers or fewer, you are legally just a cargo ship.
So they dodge all the passenger ship regulations.
They do. But for those 12 people who booked passage, it was the absolute height of exclusivity. This wasn't sleeping on a cot down in the cargo hold.
The sources describe it as considerable comfort.
These ships were beautiful. They had gorgeous wood-paneled staterooms, a dedicated lounge, a formal dining room.
You essentially dined with the captain every night.
It was known as the country house at sea concept.
That sounds incredibly civilized.
It really was. If you were a tea merchant heading out to Calcutta, or maybe a diplomat traveling to Cape Town, this was how you wanted to travel.
It was much slower than flying, obviously.
Slower, yes, but infinitely more comfortable. You spent 3 weeks drinking gin and tonics on the deck, while the ship hauled thousands of tons of cargo below your feet.
The absolute golden age of travel before cheap flights took over.
The Indian summer of the British Merchant Navy,
Right.
really. They also vastly improved the crew accommodation on these new ships, giving the sailors much better living conditions.
And they bought up 12 government ships that they had managed during the war to pad out the number.
So by 1953, they reached their post-war peak.
The fleet is almost completely rebuilt. 94 ships.
Yeah.
900,000 tons of capacity.
They are back on top of the world.
But even in peacetime, with these beautiful new ships, things still go wrong. We have to mention the City of Sydney incident in 1956.
An incredibly unfortunate accident.
Because it wasn't a mine or a torpedo this time.
No, the city of Sydney was navigating the very foggy, crowded waters of the North Sea, and she accidentally rammed directly into a collier, a coal ship called the Corchester.
Just a straight-up collision.
The impact was so severe that the Corchester literally broke in half and sank.
It's a stark reminder that these ships, loaded with thousands of tons of cargo, have massive, massive momentum.
Even with radar, which was becoming very common by the 50s, physics still wins. You can't stop a 10,000-ton ship on a dime.
So we get through the 50s and into the 1960s. Ellerman Lines is rich. They have these beautiful, fast cargo liners, and they have a global network of routes.
But there is an asteroid heading straight for the industry.
1967, the looming threat, the box.
The shipping container.
We really cannot overstate how much containerization disrupted the entire world.
It changed everything. Before the container, shipping was what we call break bulk.
Meaning everything was loose.
Basically, yes. You had cranes lifting individual nets of coffee sacks, wooden barrels, wooden crates, pallets of machinery.
A complete mess.
A total mess. A ship would arrive in port, and it would have to spend 2 or maybe 3 full weeks just unloading and reloading.
So the ship is earning absolutely zero money for, what, 60% of its lifespan?
Exactly. It's essentially just a very expensive floating warehouse while it's in port. Plus, you needed literal armies of stevedores and dock workers to manually move all that stuff.
And theft was rampant.
Oh, massive theft. Shrinkage, they called it politely. Cases of whiskey would just go missing.
But the container changed all the math.
Completely. A standardized steel box. A ship docks. Massive specialized cranes pull the boxes straight off onto trucks or trains, put new ones on, and the ship is gone.
In like 12 hours.
Right. The efficiency gains were astronomical.
And this killed Ellerman.
It killed their entire business model. Ellerman's beautiful, fast, 12-passenger cargo liners were suddenly totally obsolete.
Because they weren't designed to hold uniform steel boxes.
They were designed for break bulk, they were too slow to load and unload by the new standards, and the capital required to switch containers was just astronomical.
You didn't just need to buy new ships.
You needed new port terminals, you needed new trucks, new rail links, new logistics computer systems to track the boxes.
And simultaneously, while this technological revolution is happening, they have a massive geopolitical problem.
Decolonization.
The world map isn't pink anymore.
Exactly. Newly independent nations, specifically India, wanted to set up their own shipping companies. They didn't want to rely on the old British imperial lines anymore.
So they established their own state lines.
Like the Shipping Corporation of India. And these new governments implemented protectionist policies. They said, look, if you want to trade with India, 50% of the cargo has to go on our Indian ships.
So Ellerman instantly loses its guaranteed monopoly on its most profitable routes.
And as technology is out of date, it was a perfect storm.
They tried to adapt, though. The records show in 1966, they joined the ACT group.
The Associated Container Transportation Consortium. They tried to pool their resources with other struggling British lines to build container ships together because no one could afford it alone.
They even tried diversifying completely outside of shipping.
They expanded into hotels, they bought into the brewing industry, they even bought a printing company.
Which is the classic corporate panic move. We don't know how to make money on ships anymore, let's try to sell beer.
It rarely ever works out. By 1973, they merged all their remaining shipping companies into one single division just to cut costs.
But profitability just plummeted. And by the 1980s, the writing was on the wall. The company began what the outline hilariously calls the corporate potato pass.
It gets sold from hand to hand as everyone tries to extract whatever value is left.
So in 1983, the Barclay brothers, the famous billionaire twins, buy it.
And they sell it. In 1985, the management actually buys it out.
A management buyout. But that doesn't last.
No, in 1987, it gets sold to Trafalgar House, and they merge it with Cunard to form Cunard Ellerman.
Now, that actually sounds like a strong brand, combining two legendary names.
It was a strong brand for a brief moment. But the bleeding didn't stop. In 1991, it gets passed along again, this time to the Andrew Weir Shipping Group.
And finally, in 2003, it is sold to Hamburg Süd, the massive German shipping conglomerate.
And that was essentially the end of the line.
In 2004, Hamburg Süd announced they were officially dropping the Ellerman name. The remaining city of ships were repainted, renamed, or sold off for scrap.
The staff were let go or just absorbed into the German machine.
And after 112 years of history, the name Ellerman Lines completely ceased to exist.
It feels like such a quiet, bureaucratic death for such a loud, dramatic history.
It really does. I mean, you have streets named after John Ellerman in Amsterdam and Antwerp.
But the company itself just evaporated into the ledger of a foreign conglomerate.
That is usually how these corporate stories end. Globalization just kind of eats its parents.
It does. It consolidates into these anonymous mega corporations.
That is not where this story ends.
No, it's not.
Because in 2021, something incredibly weird happened.
The supply chain crisis.
Right. Everyone remembers the pandemic. Ports were completely clogged. Ships were parked off the coast of California for weeks.
And shipping rates went absolutely insane. They went from like $2,000 a container to $20,000 a container. Everyone was desperate for cargo space.
And in the middle of all that chaos, a ghost appeared.
A new company, backed by Unsinkable Lines, launched a brand new cargo service between the UK, China, Europe, and the USA.
And they needed a name.
They called it Ellerman City Liners.
They literally brought the name back from the dead.
They did. After a 17-year hiatus, the name returned to commercial use.
Why? I mean, why revive a dead British brand?
Because they recognized that in the shipping industry, trust and legacy mean everything, and Ellerman still meant something in the collective memory of the ports and the forwarders.
It meant British reliability. It meant a century of history.
Exactly.
So today, right now, as we're speaking, there are giant container ships moving across the ocean with Ellerman stamped on the side.
Yes. They are chartering ships. They're running active routes. The city of Prefix is even back on some vessels.
That is wild.
It's a modern, asset-light version of the old company, obviously. They aren't building passenger steamships. But the lineage, the brand, is back.
It really is a remarkable survival story when you zoom out. From that 800,000 pounds Victorian startup to the dummy battleships of World War I.
To the luxury cargo liners of the 50s.
To being chewed up by the corporate mergers. And finally, this modern container revival.
I think the whole story serves as a really powerful reminder that the global trade network isn't just some anonymous automated machine.
No.
It's a deeply human endeavor. It was built on massive financial risks, on the bravery of sailors, on terrible, heartbreaking tragedies like the Benares.
And on incredible feats of seamanship like the Exeter.
So, a final thought for you to chew on. In this modern, hyper-globalized world of completely identical, anonymous shipping containers, the dramatic history of lines like Ellerman remind us of the sheer human and mechanical cost of building the world we live in today. Next time you see a container truck out on the highway, take a close look at the logo on the side. You might just be looking at a piece of history that absolutely refused to die.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.